Hi, Mike.
Hey, how you doing, Yuri? It's good to be here.
Good to work with this experiment with you. It's something as an emergent series called Drone Conversations, and it just happens to be that we keep on talking about working online, and we started with Ben Crowder's talking about why is it so difficult and trying to figure out what we could do about it. Then we continued with Asami Kubota from Japan talking about how you could organize effective online workshops. And then I just realized that we need to bring more positive flavor to it, because we all nagging about, oh, we lost something, oh, we are not able to do this because it's not physical anymore. But maybe we gained something.
I think so. I think there's some gains and some good things that come from this, and I guess that's what our session is going to be talking about. We'll be drawing and talking about those things.
Yay! Let's do that.
I'm excited.
So, what do you think? What is that we've gained?
Well, I think I believe this is forcing us to be creative as a broad statement, I think. So I would say, let me see if I can do some drawing here. So creativity, forced creativity. And,
what is forced creativity, Mike?
So I think forced creativity is when constraints are put upon you that you didn't ask for.
Love it.
Right? So, and I think sometimes that's the best way, because if you put constraints on yourself, you tend to go a little easy. Either you go too easy on yourself, or you go so draconian that you can never achieve. Right? So, in some ways, we don't have a good sense of like what's the right balance. So in some ways, having someone else force creativity on you is better, because they set the music, and then you have to figure out how to dance to the music, right? So somebody else chooses the record. So I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna draw a record player, which I have a record player here actually someplace. I moved about a year and a half ago, and I've still not unpacked my record player, and I have an old stereo system, right, that can play records. And so, but there's something really interesting about the record player that is limiting, right? It's analog, which now we have sort of a lot of analog things coming back into our lives, books and stuff. So the other thing about it is linear, right? So you're forced to listen to things in a series. I mean, you can pick up the head and you can move it around on the LP, but it's not ideal. And if you don't hit it right at the right time, it's not like a CD player. Like a CD player is always perfect, or streaming. The playlist on a streaming playlist is always perfect, right?
Yeah, choosing tracks is an art.
So the interesting thing, and I'm going to go back to the challenge of LPs. So back in the 70s, this was the option, right? There were two types. There were it started out with 45s, which had a larger hole in the middle. So this is the one that you could buy for a small amount at the store and play your favorite song. And then there was on the back was a B-side. And actually, the B-side sometimes were really good songs, but they were sort of experimental. So in some ways, they were prototypes. I think some artists or musicians would put the really good stuff on the A side and then do a test on the B side and see how something went. I imagine probably the one who controlled that would be the studio who chose what would be on there. But then there was the LP record, which came from long play. Yep. So a little different structure, right? So this was about 45 minutes. And these are like, I don't know, 5 minutes or something. Right? So these are the two options you had back in the day. And the interesting thing is, because it was linear and you didn't tend to want to jump tracks, like there, if you look at an LP, there's like, if you look closely, there's little gaps. I'm drawing them as a line, but basically it would be a gap for the tracks. But the interesting is, some bands, like say Pink Floyd, they did away with the gaps altogether. So Pink Floyd, they actually had the concept of, what if for 45 minutes we played something that was continuous from beginning to end, like there weren't clear breaks between them. So like even on the radio, they had to like forcibly break the tracks out. I think that Pink Floyd sort of did this. And so it was more like an experience. And
Jethro Tull did something like that. They have like one album which is like one song consisted of several songs, right?
Yeah. So there's that. So it was more about experience, right? What is the experience of like you, even like jazz records? Like one of the most famous is Miles Davis, Kinda Blue. And what's interesting about that is, you know, these I love Jethro Tull. This. So Miles Davis, Kinda Blue. The interesting thing about that was they actually recorded it. I'm trying to remember. They recorded it and released it. They recorded it normally, but the speed was too high. So instead of normal speed, it was probably like 1.2% faster. And so originally, when it got released, all these musicians would listen to Miles Davis playing these amazing riffs with his trumpet, and they could not figure out how to do it. Like they tried to replicate it, and they couldn't pull it off. And it sort of gave, not only did it give Miles Davis a godlike appearance, but later they found that it was actually 1.2% faster than it was supposed to be, and then they slowed it down. So like the new masters will have it slower. They have it at actual speed. I'm not sure how we ended up in music with this, but interesting. I think that it's interesting that the constraint here is that you've got this limit 5 minutes or 45 minutes or whatever a 45. Somebody will know what a 45. You know, this is a 45 right here, like what the total was, and. So again, these are sort of limitations placed on musicians, but what they did is they took the limitations and turned them into positives. The other thing that I think happened from the LP was, I'm trying to think, like there were certain rock stations that were known as, I don't know what they called, album oriented rock, AOR. So the idea was they pulled, tracks from an album and did a mix. So you would listen to a DJ who would have a particular perspective on music, and they would put the music together for you. Right? It was not, that was the thing that you went for was like Wolfman Jack or something. Let's draw a little Wolfman Jack. I think he tended to be really shaggy, right? I think he just died recently. Didn't he have a hat too? I'm not sure now.
No, he has.
So that's Wolfman Jack. So it's interesting how these limitations sort of force you in a certain direction, right? So this album-oriented rock stuff was it emphasized, DJs, DJ culture, right? If you think about DJ culture now, this probably spawns from this, right? So now the DJ culture is maybe the two turntables, right?
Yep.
And a mixer in between. And if you're a really good DJ, not only are you picking the music, right? But you're you got some kind of a mixer here, right? That's connecting these two, and you can fade them, and you can mix them together, right? In interesting ways. Yep, there we go. So again, this limitation becomes an attraction because you can do things like it's hard to do like scratching. Like if you think about like the 80s and sampling, right? Those all sort of came from these DJs, right? The DJ culture, I guess you would call it. So without that DJ culture, maybe we don't get some of the songs that we enjoy now, and then that sort of pushes some other thing, right? So my favorite. So I had LPs, of course, but if I look back to the limitations I was a huge fan of cassette tapes. I don't know if anyone watching or listening remembers cassette tapes. They were kind of amazing because I could build, like thinking about DJ culture, I produced these cassettes. It was portable. And what I did with it was, at the time, I was into new wave music. I'm old enough that was... New wave music was sort of the thing when I was in college. And so I used cassette tapes and new wave music on a station called 91.7 FM. And locally that was the Milwaukee School of Engineering station. And they tended to play new wave stuff at most of the times of the day. So the other thing is I had all these friends that now had moved to different places that I didn't see them anymore. Like I stayed in Milwaukee, but they moved away. And so what I did is I produced a mix for them. So I would sit with I would spend hours and hours listening to new wave radio with my cassette deck. And I would wait for just the right song, and I would cue it up, and I would record it on this master cassette tape. Yeah. And I would record, and just piece them together. And then, additionally for the DJ culture, I didn't have a good microphone, but I would record myself as the DJ, telling them what the song was and who it was from. And, we started doing little funny skits in there. And it was a way to share what we were experiencing, but to these friends who were far away.
I know what you're talking about. I did the same when I was in high
really?
school.
Yeah.
I was listening to a rock music station, and every time I think my favorite song started, I would have my cassette
just
thingy
ready to go
on the pause, and all you needed to do is just to release the pause button, and then it would record immediately.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. And the failed guy on the right is the sound wave, because that's what I think of when I see those cassettes.
Yeah.
That Decepticon.
Yep.
Who could hold the cassettes? Yeah.
So this is where we would put our finger right here, waiting for the perfect song, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think back to those times. So it sounds like a tangent, but in a lot of ways it was not, because we used the technology we had at the time. And in the same way, I think we have the opportunity to do this now, right? So if you follow this path, it's like all limitations, like an LP, it's only 45 minutes long. It probably was a pain to make it. So people had to be really careful about what they put on. They had to think about the experience. But then when you came to the, that led to album-oriented rock and ways of like structuring an LP. So then that eventually led to DJ culture as one stream, but it also led to this idea of personal DJ culture. Maybe that's what I would call that.
I totally like that thread of the conversation. But I still find it difficult to relate to the limitations imposed on us right now. What you have here is certainly an example.
History.
Yeah, and a nice one. It's a good reminder and a nostalgic moment for sure. It's just there.
How do we translate this?
Yeah. You couldn't choose, because that was the natural development of the technology, and we were, of course, creative within the boundaries, but we didn't know any better, right? Right now, it's a bit different and similar at the same time. Different because you were like forced a few steps back on the side of the experiences, and it's not that you don't know how it could be. You know how it could be, but it's not there anymore, or you don't know when it's going to be back, or maybe it's not going to be back. So I totally love the angle here. It says, let's focus on the positive side and let's use the creativity caused by the limitation. It's just like, how can we focus on the positive sides and not being annoyed with remembering how it could be like when we had the opportunity of the physical meetings.
Yeah. So I want to come back to DJ culture. So I wrote something on the left here. It's forced by technology limits. So it was, we were just limited by technology, by LPs, by cassette tapes, there was only so much you could do, right? But even within that, there was creativity, right? So there was our limitations. I think now what are we forced? We're limited by physical interaction now, right? So now with the forced creativity. By COVID-19, right? So the reluctance to get sick, we're intentionally keeping ourselves inside as much as possible, and not interacting, right? So,
but by the way, I just watched this limited series dedicated to COVID-19 on Netflix. And I didn't know this, but COVID-19 is the disease caused by the virus, right? I didn't know about it.
Yeah, that's true. So coronavirus is the actual...
It's like something called like SARS-CoV-2 or something.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I thought that COVID-19 was actually the name of the virus.
Yeah, that's the result, I think.
Well, it's good to be nerdy.
So there we go. So yeah, there's one thing leads to another good 80s song, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to say that we're forced into creativity by COVID-19. So what does that lead to, right?
Yeah.
In some small ways, like some things you're seeing peeking out are restaurant takeout. Right, that's one thing. Like how are these restaurants keeping themselves alive? They're doing takeout orders where you can come and pick up. I just had a coffee at a local coffee shop that just reopened, and they had a whole setup like I'll draw the doorway. So they had the doorway. Normally you would go inside, but you didn't. So they had like a plexiglass thing here where the baristas worked on a table. Up here was the scanner for your card, right? And then right here was like this is the place where your drinks would come out. So they kept themselves back behind this thing, and they would be they're working over here on the machine making your drinks or stuff, and then they come over here and then deliver, right? So they were sort of coming up with a creative solution to keep their employees healthy. They also, of course, had masks on, right? Which you want to see, right? So this is in the eating space, in the coffee space, it's forced this creativity. I think our opportunity, where we were sort of going at this before, is maybe DJ culture. I'm going to switch over to this side. Is maybe we are the DJ now, right?
Yeah. And is there anything we do not notice as an opportunity? Just trying to deflect it back to the working environment.
So a few things. I think there's what I'm picking up on is there's sort of a desire to see you as a DJ. What's your perspective? Because right now we're not in the same room as each other. You can't. It's not quite as easy to explain your perspective, but you can explain your perspective. Now you and I, we both do podcasts, right? So that's one. It's a medium, right? So that can be interviews, or that can be monologue, I guess, right? So one is that. Another is webinars. We are involved with a friend of ours. My friend's brother does trivia night. So he spends a lot of time producing a PowerPoint where he does all this trivia homework, and then our family goes on there and we watch it, and then we write down our answers with a pen and paper, and then we text in our answers. So we'll be the roadies, and we have 8 right out of 10, right? So we'll text this to our friend who is the keeper. So they're using Zoom to manage the presentation. They're putting the burden on us to just use paper and pen. And then we're not allowed to use our phones except to text, our score to the scorekeeper, right? So this is a really simple, low tech and high tech. It's like a combination of the two for trivia, right?
And how does it work so far?
It's been really great. We've done 3 of them. He has just sort of elevated his game a little bit, so now he's done a MailChimp. So we get an email with like all the information in an email now.
Interesting.
Because he has so many people that are joining on Tuesday nights. And there's sort of a culture that's building up around this in a way.
It's interesting. So you use all of the modern technology, so to speak, right? The one that you might find with the marketing people, but you use that to your advantage to serve your needs as a family or close friends group, and entertain each other to cover the distances we're put forcibly into.
Yeah. And these are kind of outbound things, right? So you and I, we do podcasts, and there's lots of free services that you can use to do that, right? But ultimately, we want to hear your perspective, right? So that's the important part is perspective of people.
Yeah, and I just tried to draw these 2 guys with sharing.
Oh yeah, sharing perspective.
Sharing those perspectives.
So one thing that my friend Steve Silbert and I talked about was we've been running a Slack channel before all this stuff happened, and we immediately thought this would be really interesting to start using as a tool, right? So 2 things. One thing that's been going on a long time for Slack is daily Doodle. And what they do is you put out, there's a word, and then everybody does doodles, and then they send it back.
Yeah, I love it.
That's pretty cool.
I love it. It's like sticky note, 20 seconds.
Yep.
1 color, don't think, draw, whatever you can in those
Fast.
20 seconds.
Yeah. Don't think too fast, too much, yep.
Yeah. Again, back to limitations. That's the limitation. You want to create some tension to fuel your creativity. Because if you start thinking, you get trapped in those like, oh, is it good enough? Or, oh, does it look good?
No time to think about that.
And then once you are there, then you're done because you cannot escape that trap of perfectionism. If there is such a thing.
Yep.
But also I'm just looking at what we're doing here, and we've probably used more than 10 minutes now. That was the original idea, but that's fine. But I just think that it's a living illustration of 2 people being capable of having a meaningful conversation around a live drawing.
I love it. This is fun.
And we are not necessarily, well, I will not speak on your behalf, but I'm not a live recorder, live graphic recorder.
Yeah, I don't do it too much either.
So I don't think that I'm really kind of skilled in that. All I'm using is just simplified drawings, and I just use the quality of a drawing good enough for you to understand me. What is that I mapped there? So I just also thought and hoped that us doing this could encourage people to have more of these. And you don't have to be seated next to each other at a physical table in order to do so. We used the technology to bring us closer together and have this meaningful conversation, right?
Yep. And I think, I mean, even the tool that we're using now, which is Google Jamboard and Record, I mean, we're sort of piecing it together, and we're working within limitations. Like, we have a lot more power than back in the days when I had a cassette tape. But still, ultimately, we're doing that. Good enough. So what is the old phrase? It's perfection is the enemy of good enough or something? Perfection is the enemy of good, right? So you can get hung up on perfection and crash on the rocks of perfection.
Yeah. Good stuff.
I like the little color tonality that you're adding. I haven't done that yet, but
that's something I've learned from doing the two previous conversations, is that too many black lines get it difficult to follow, but just adding some gentle touch of shading,
just a little bit,
accentuate the spots, and then it's easier to follow. Yeah,
good enough.
Okay.
And now I think we both have to sign it, Yuri.
Oh yeah, let's do that. Yeah. Well,
I'll wait. You go first, and I'll go second.
Yeah. Okay. I'll just put something like my Instagram.
Yeah. There you go. Just thinker.
Yay.
And I'll do this over here.
Yeah. Fantastic.